I used to think that after 12 years of dedication and helping the company weather every crisis, I would at least be respected. But that morning in the gleaming glass-walled conference room overlooking Seattle in front of the entire department, I realized my value could be reduced to a single glance and a few words of image assessment. The brand image alignment meeting on Monday morning. It was drizzling in Seattle, but the 19th floor meeting room was bright and cold like a freezer. Tyler, the new deputy chief financial officer, stood at the head of the table, looking like he had just stepped out of a gym magazine. A tight-fitting suit, a perfect tie, and a "I know I'm handsome" smile. The first slide appeared photos of model employees, all wearing perfectly fitted uniforms, smiling brightly, shoulders straight as if posing for a magazine cover. Tyler began. "We want every face here to fully reflect the spirit of our brand, healthy professional, and inspiring at first glance." It sounded polite, but for some reason his eyes lingered on me for a moment longer. Next to me, Claire, the marketing director, sat with her legs crossed, her golden hair perfectly styled as if she had just stepped out of a salon. She nodded, smiling, but her eyes quickly scanned from head to toe. And of course, Claire interjected her voice as sweet as honey, but with a sharp edge. Brand image starts with our personal image. I heard a chair shift slightly across the table. Jason, the sales team leader, leaned over and whispered to his colleague, and both of them giggled as if they had heard a funny story. No one had to say it outright, but I knew exactly what they were implying. I was the only person in the room wearing a size XL, and clearly in their eyes. I was the design flaw that needed fixing. I didn't react. I just smiled and took notes. 3 days after that meeting, I received an email inviting me to an operational realignment meeting. Believe me, in company language, realignment means someone is getting fired. The meeting room that morning was so quiet that I could hear the sound of pens tapping on the table. Brad, the CEO, with salt and pepper hair, he always dyed brown to look younger, forced a smile. Beside him stood Tyler, hands crossed over his chest, looking like he was about to announce an award to someone else. Claire was there too, of course, with a latte in hand and a form-fitting dress that highlighted her model-perfect waist. Brad spoke, his voice soft but cold. "In order to maintain our image and operational efficiency, we have decided to consolidate some positions, including yours, Lisa." I raised my eyebrows. "Consolidate? What does that mean? Will there be an equivalent position?" Tyler smiled as if to say, "I'm about to say something really important. We believe it would be better if your department were transferred to a team, more aligned with our new image direction." Claire added, her voice light as a breeze, but cutting deep. "Sometimes a brand needs representatives who can inspire from the very first glance." I heard every word. No one said "you're fat," but we all knew what it meant. Rick, the in-house lawyer, sat in the corner of the room, smirking. No one here has ever successfully negotiated severance pay. Especially women. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment in Capitol Hill, the yellow glow of the kitchen light casting a warm glow on my cheap glass of wine. The cardboard box containing my company assets, a few photos, a cactus plant, and a mug with the words "World's Best Compliance Officer" printed on it sat abandoned on the table. I didn't cry. I just stared silently at the offboarding packet HR had given me that afternoon. 2 sheets of paper, a few cold words, signed to receive severance pay and waive all claims. Perhaps they thought a plus-sized woman just fired from a job she'd been at for 12 years would take the meager severance pay and disappear. They even thought this morning's mockery would make me bow my head in silence. But they forgot one thing: I don't just remember every procedure, every number. I also keep the things they thought were buried. I opened the drawer and took out the red USB drive labeled CYA, cover your ass, which I used to joke about with my old colleagues. Inside were years of documents I had saved, internal emails, unedited reports, and even before and after versions of financial forecasts. And most importantly, Clause 14B. In 2016, when the company underwent a major overhaul of its compliance policies, I quietly added a small clause if any employee was terminated after the company submitted a misleading financial report. They would receive 3 times the standard severance pay plus all lost wages. At the time, no one noticed. They laughed behind my back, calling me a pear-shaped audit machine as I pored over every word. But today, that clause is the one thing they can't swallow. I poured myself another glass of wine, took out my phone, and called Natalie, my best friend from law school. Now, a partner at a small law firm specializing in cases involving big companies bullying smaller ones. She picked up after 2 rings. Lisa. It's been a while. Don't tell me you're calling to ask me to go to the gym. No. I'm calling to get revenge. There was a moment of silence, then Natalie laughed softly. Tell me everything. I began, starting with Tyler's look, Claire's smile, Rick's. No one here negotiates benefits, and finally the 14B clause that I had kept secret for 7 years. After listening, Natalie let out a whistle. Lisa, this isn't a bullet. It's a missile. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at Seattle, shrouded in rain. But inside, I felt a cold spark. If they want to criticize me for this body, then this body will walk up and collect the check they have to pay. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because my brain had been running like a printer all night. Outside, Seattle was still pouring rain. But in my head, the sky was clear, the clouds had dispersed, and every step was as clear as a Google Maps map. Natalie called while I was making coffee. Are you ready? I took a sip and smiled, more than ready. She had drafted a silent signal, a polite but sufficiently threatening legal document. No direct threats, just a request to clarify whether Clause 14B applied to my case, accompanied by a few harmless documents. At least they looked harmless. But the recipient would understand immediately. Opening that email meant they were looking at a trigger. At 9:15 a.m., the document was sent directly to the company's legal department, CC'd to the board of directors, and BCC'd to an arbitrator whom Natalie knew was allergic to financial shenanigans. I didn't sign it. No need. I wanted them to lose sleep wondering who was pulling the trigger. At 11 a.m., my phone rang. HR was on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Hi, Lisa. We'd like to, discuss your severance package again. Maybe we can find a solution that works for both of us. I pretended to be distracted. Oh, I thought the company didn't negotiate with, women like me. There was a long silence on the other end, then a hurried change of tone. Perhaps your case is special. I hung up and sent a message to Natalie. They smell smoke, she replied succinctly. Now let them see the fire. In the afternoon, we opened the red USB drive containing the documents. Each email and report had been massaged before publication, and the best of them was a conversation that Claire, the head of human resources, sent to the CFO. Lisa won't cause any trouble. She's just worried about paying off her gym membership. I reread that sentence slowly, savoring it like drops of bitter coffee. The 32nd floor meeting room of McAllister and Cone gleamed as if it had just been waxed. On the table were bottled water black coffee and stacks of files neatly arranged to the point of artificiality. I walked in wearing a dark gray blazer, my hair neatly tied back. No makeup, just a smile that made the person across from me wonder, what does she know? CFO Mark sat at the head of the table, his face pale. To his right was Claire, the one who had told me I was only good at making money to pay off my gym membership, now with her eyes downcast, twisting a pen between her fingers as if she wanted to break it in 2. To his left was Thomas, the VP of Finance, who liked to wear slim-fit suits and post photos of his abs on Instagram. Natalie sat next to me, opened her laptop, and placed a thin file on the table. She spoke, her voice light as a breeze but sharp as a knife. We're here to discuss Clause 14B and related documents. Lisa, would you like to start? I looked up, my eyes scanning each person. I just want to say one thing before we get into the details. Never underestimate someone just because you don't like the way they look. Thomas chuckled, but his smile faded as soon as Natalie turned to the first page. The page was blank except for a section of an email printed in large letters with yellow highlights. Lisa won't give us any trouble. She's just trying to pay off her gym membership. Claire swallowed hard, and Mark turned to glare at her. I continued speaking slowly. I've been silent long enough for you to think you're safe. But in reality, I've been saving every file, every number, every sarcastic email sent to the company. Natalie pushed another stack of documents. The financial reports had been edited before publication with Mark and Thomas's signatures. The room fell silent as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. Natalie smiled. Section 14B clearly states if there are financial discrepancies and a restructuring occurs immediately afterward, my clients are entitled to triple compensation plus legal fees plus damages for defamation. We've done a preliminary calculation, 1.53 million USD. Mark tried to object, but I cut him off. This is a very low price for what I could present in court. If you want to see what a financial fraud scandal involving body shaming looks like in the headlines, feel free to refuse. No one said another word. Only the sound of pens signing the agreement echoed crisp and sharp like the shattering of a mask. I left the meeting room without looking back. There was no need. Behind me, I knew they were busy picking up the pieces of the power they had just dropped. The briefcase felt lighter than ever, but the envelope inside was heavy. $1.53 million. Heavy with the years I had spent swallowing every mocking word, every scrutinizing glance from head to toe. On the way to the elevator, I looked at myself in the reflective glass. It was still me, the same hair, the same figure. But I was no longer the fat girl they looked down on. Now I was the woman they had to sign their names, bow their heads, and pay a price to leave their lives. That night, I came home and hugged my daughter. She laughed, not caring how much her mother weighed, only knowing that her mother had just won a battle without having to raise her voice. We ate pizza, drank Coke, and I realized freedom is sometimes just being able to live as yourself without anyone having the right to belittle you. I kept all the emails, all the evidence, not out of hatred, but to remind myself that silence is not weakness. It is a step back so you can aim for the target. And if you are listening to this story, if you have ever been ridiculed for your weight, your appearance, or anything else, you don't need permission to exist. Remember, you don't have to change to please them. You just need to change the game. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment, share your experience, and subscribe to the channel. Because you and I, we deserve to see each other at our strongest.